Section 2. Intelligence. It very early became apparent that our peacetime tables of organization had not taken into account the combat intelligence requirements. By examination of the British experience, it was at once discovered that the adequate briefing of crews and the proper interrogation of crews called for a minimum of 10 to 12 intelligence officers, with each group on each station. The whole intelligence function was carefully analyzed on the British side, and an intelligence organization was built up in the 8th Air Force and in all subordinate units. This included the organization of an intelligence school properly to train officers and non-commissioned officers in the intelligence task. The importance of the intelligence function in the operation of an Air Force can be easily overlooked or discounted. Often unsatisfactory operations can be traced, and the blame rightly placed on the lack of a proper appreciation of the importance of the intelligence staff function. The RAF had more than 2 years' experience in war before we entered the theater. It had a large force of trained intelligence personnel, and it had a large intelligence section in the Air Ministry. The 8th Air Force took full advantage of this experience in building up its intelligence agencies. We were careful not to duplicate personnel in establishments where a proper result could be attained by placing sections in British establishments. This was particularly true of prisoner of war work, enemy order of battle, and photo interpretation. The experience of the 8th Air Force indicated clearly that an Air Force in a theater of operation must prepare and be responsible for its own air intelligence, and that it must build up an adequate establishment to serve this function. Section 3. Operations. The first phase of the 8th Air Force operations from the United Kingdom was largely of an experimental nature. It was initially undertaken with but one heavy bombardment group of B-17s. The first mission on August 17, 1942, contained but 12 B-17s. This has now grown to a proportion where nearly 800 heavy bombers were dispatched on a single mission. It first had to be demonstrated that daylight precision bombing with American equipment and crews was practicable against the highly organized defenses in Europe, and that the equipment was satisfactory for the purpose. Forces being small initially, and the rate of flow of replacement aircraft being even smaller, it was necessary to cut the rate of operations accordingly, otherwise the whole force would have been lost and dissipated in a very brief period of time. It was necessary also to work out operational technique to include types of formation best suited to pierce the heavy defenses and destroy the industrial targets assigned. It was discovered at an early date that conditions pertained in this theater, which made it necessary to give approximately 2 weeks additional training to crews after their arrival in this theater before they are prepared successfully to operate in and out of this island and against the German stronghold. This program of training was very carefully prepared, and it has worked out very successfully. It involves a test of all combat crews in formation flying, gunnery, and bombing, and it includes specialized training in radio procedure, acquaintance with the system of defense in Great Britain, special courses in navigation, air-sea rescue, prisoner of war conduct, and additional training in high-altitude flying and aerial gunnery. This brief indoctrination period has been given to each group and every replacement combat crew prior to their first mission. The system is now firmly established, but the individual courses are changed to meet changing enemy tactics and to keep it up to date. This careful pre-combat training program has played a large part in keeping losses well below allowable limits. Many synthetic devices have been developed or borrowed from the RAF to promote and facilitate this training, and specialized schools on flying fields have been established, called Combat Crew Replacement Centers, in order to give this training with a minimum of time and maximum efficiency. At the time of the Casablanca Conference in January 1943, the 8th Air Force had not received a clear-cut directive outlining its combat task. The undersigned was called to that conference and told by the commanding general, Army Air Forces, that there was considerable pressure being brought to bear to have the heavy bombers of the 8th Air Force join with the RAF in night bombing. I protested that this would be a great mistake, and General Arnold told me that I would have an opportunity to present my views first to him and thereafter to the Prime Minister. He gave me a list of questions to which I was to prepare the answers. The questionnaire and list of all answers is included as an enclosure with this report. They were presented to General Arnold, and thereafter I had the opportunity to spend an hour with the Prime Minister and go over the case for daylight bombing with him. The Prime Minister assured me that I'd be given an opportunity to prove my case. Early in April, a group of operation analysis brought to me a list of the systems of German industry which, in their opinion, should have the highest priority on our target list. General Arnold asked what we in the Air Ministry thought of this report of the operations analysts. He further directed that, if we believed this report sound, we were to submit a list of the forces required to accomplish the destruction of the key targets in these systems. A board of able officers was appointed to review the report of the operations analysts, and they recommended to the undersigned that the report was sound. The Air Ministry also stated that the report coincided with its view. Thereafter, the same board, under the supervision of the undersigned, prepared an estimate of the forces required to accomplish the progressive destruction of these targets. The undersigned went to Washington in late April and presented to the combined chiefs of staff the proposed targets and the planned buildup of the 8th Air Force to accomplish the destruction of the targets in question. Early in May 1943, the combined chiefs of staff approved a plan called the Combined Bomber Offensive, and it stated that the forces would be furnished for the accomplishment of the task as nearly as this could be done, consistent with the requirements in other theaters. Succeeding events since the initiation of the Combined Bomber Offensive have confirmed the wisdom of the plan. And looking back over the past year, it is remarkable how accurately that plan set forth the operational yardsticks. The plan was to cover a period of operations from May 1943 to April 1944. To date, about 62% of the forces have been furnished and 66% of the tasks have been accomplished. This shows quite clearly how accurate was the original estimate and how clearly the officers who prepared the plan visualized the task and understood the operational yardsticks, i.e., the capabilities of an air force in this theater and the size and nature of the enemy reaction. The plan was delayed by the unavoidable diversion of forces in support of the Mediterranean operation. In the late summer of 1942, the operational experiment conducted by the 8th Air Force was largely curtailed by the depletion of the 8th Air Force to build up the 12th Air Force for support of the Mediterranean landings in the Tunisian campaign. In the summer of 1943, 3 groups of B-24s were again withdrawn at a critical stage of the 8th Air Force operations in Germany, further to support operations in the Mediterranean. Probably the most serious blow to the 8th Air Force during its first year of operations was the loss of all its long-range fighters, P-38 aircraft, to the Mediterranean Air Forces. The bombardment operations in Europe had, therefore, to be carried out by the 8th Air Force without accompanying fighters. From February 1942, when the study of RAF methods first made it apparent, until the present time, it has been evident that the weather in the United Kingdom, and particularly in the target areas in Europe, would be a controlling factor in heavy bombardment operations. It was obviously not possible, successfully, to bomb targets by daylight precision methods when they are cloud covered. Experience showed that more than 5/10 cloud cover would likely render such operations unsuccessful. Great emphasis was placed, therefore, on the development of a Pathfinder force which could make it possible to bomb with accuracy through cloud cover. All devices which would make it possible to effect this happy result were tried out under greatest pressure, and it was determined that H-2S and its American counterpart, H-2X, was the best equipment for leading formations of daylight bombers against cloud-covered targets. The shortage of equipment has made it impossible to date to provide more than 12 of these H-2X-equipped aircraft. Experience has shown that it is necessary to have one leader and one alternate to lead each combat wing as a minimum. It has been possible, therefore, to send out from 400 to 500 heavy bombers led by these H-2X-equipped airplanes. During last November, 11 such missions were executed. The results are most encouraging. It is now possible, quite definite, that an adequate supply of H-2X-equipped aircraft with trained crews will make it possible to bomb German industrial cities effectively through the solid overcast. The experience the last 2 months in overcast bombing has indicated quite clearly that even winter weather in England can be overcome to the extent that 8 to 10 missions per month can be launched as full-scale major operations with good effect. It has also been clearly shown that it is not the weather in the bases so much as the weather in the target area which is the controlling factor. Much time, effort, and study has been given to the development of the best possible organization for heavy bombardment operations in this theater. It is now definitely determined that the following represents the ideal plan. The striking formation is the combat wing. It is composed of 3 groups. The wing is the smallest formation which can adequately defend itself from German fighters, and it is also a formation of the required size for the destruction of normal targets, which is a happy coincidence. It is the largest formation which can bomb with acceptable accuracy, and it has been amply demonstrated that it is a size of formation which can bomb with great precision and effect. The group should have an initial equipment of 48 aircraft operational with 12 in immediate reserve on the station. It should have at a minimum of 48 crews operational and 12 in immediate reserve on the station, plus 25% reserve in theater. The Air Division, comprised of 5 or 6 air wings, is a necessary administrative subdivision. The most effective employment of a bomber force of this size, 25 to 40 heavy groups, must be subdivided into at least 3 air divisions. It has been demonstrated that fighter support in this theater is essential to the heavy bomber as long as the German Air Force remains at its present size and vigor, otherwise losses will be so high as to be uneconomical. The B-17 and B-24 airplanes with improvements and modifications found necessary as a result of actual combat experience have proven to be excellent bombers for this theater. They are satisfactory both in range and striking power, and their heavy defensive armament makes it possible for them to take a great toll of enemy fighter strength. The 8th Fighter Command has developed a technique for the combat training and introduction into combat of fighter units which is excellent in every regard. The morale of fighter pilots is superlative. Our fighter groups have proven more than a match for the enemy far inside Germany, plane for plane, element for element, and squadron by squadron. Our fighters have shown a thirst for combat and an enthusiasm for their task. They have no greater admirers than the bombardment crews whom they support. The P-47 has proven an excellent fighter, and it will be even better when provided with paddle propellers and water boost, which is just now getting underway. The P-38 has already demonstrated superior combat performance as it has been thoroughly tried by one group and the second group equipped with this type is now just getting into combat. One group equipped with P-51 aircraft of the 9th Air Force has been engaged on several missions recently in support of our heavy bomber operations with excellent results. The indications are that this type also will join the P-38 and P-47 as an excellent heavy bomber support fighter aircraft to the limit of its range as increased by the use of droppable tanks. We can now say definitely that the presence of superior fighter aircraft in strength to, over and from the target will decrease our bomber losses from 50 to 75%. The exact percentage will depend on the size of the enemy fighter force and the vigor with which it attacks. It probably will never be possible for protecting fighters to ensure bombers against any losses if the enemy presses home its fighter attacks in a determined manner with a considerable force. There are several features of operation auxiliary to the heavy bombardment operations of this Air Force, but which are very important and which are being pressed with vigor. These include the organization of 2 special squadrons for the support of sabotage operations, the organization of 2 squadrons especially equipped with counter-radar measures, a special force of night-flying aircraft for dropping leaflets and propaganda in enemy territory, photograph reconnaissance units for the purpose of photographing targets and securing target damage photographs, and a special weather reconnaissance flight. All of these are highly specialized tasks. They require crews of great experience. These tasks and these units, together with the Pathfinder Force, are absolutely essential to successful Air Force operations in this theater.